The council chamber stretched wider than most human cities. Crystalline walls rose hundreds of meters overhead, refracting light from 3 different suns into colors that Earth had no names for. Representatives from 47 civilizations sat in their designated sections, some breathing methane, others existing as energy patterns contained in magnetic bottles. The air hummed with translation fields, converting thousands of languages into comprehensible meaning. Commander Thelazik of the Vryn Empire stood at attention in his delegation's area. His 4 eyes tracked every movement in the chamber. 2 centuries of military service had taught him to observe, to calculate, to predict. Today he watched something that made his instincts whisper warnings his logic refused to hear. The subject on the agenda was humanity. These creatures arrived at our borders 3 months ago, Speaker Vorish announced, his tentacles rippling with dismissive gestures. They claim to have developed faster than light travel independently. They request trade agreements, technology exchanges, and diplomatic recognition. A wave of chittering laughter rolled through the chamber. The Kaldrith representative, a being that resembled a floating crystal cluster, pulsed with amusement. Independently? Impossible. They clearly stole the technology, probably from a crashed survey vessel. Their homeworld is rich in heavy metals and rare elements, another delegate added. But their society is fractured. They still wage wars among themselves. Primitive. Thelazik had reviewed the files on humanity. The species had only left their home system 15 years ago. Their ships were crude, their weapons simple chemical and nuclear reactions. They had no unified government, no single culture. By galactic standards, they were infants stumbling into a room full of adults. They've established 7 colonies in unclaimed space, Vorish continued. Each one violates standard settlement protocols. They terraform without environmental impact assessments. They extract resources without sustainability studies. They breed without population controls. Typical carbon-based impulsivity, someone muttered. The human ambassador stood in the petitioner's circle at the chamber's center. Her name was Chen, according to the files. She wore a simple black suit, her gray hair pulled back severely. She looked small under the vast ceiling, surrounded by beings who had mastered space travel when her ancestors were still learning to control fire. Ambassador Chen, Vorish addressed her. This council has reviewed your species' petition. We find your civilization lacking in the fundamental requirements for galactic society. You have no unified governance. Your technology is derivative at best, stolen at worst. Your expansion is reckless and dangerous. Chen stood perfectly still. Thelazik noticed she didn't fidget, didn't show the nervous behaviors most young species displayed when facing rejection. Therefore, Vorish continued, this council votes to deny humanity's petition for recognition. Furthermore, we impose a complete trade embargo, no technology transfers, no diplomatic exchanges, no access to established trade routes. Humanity will be quarantined to its current territory until such time as you achieve the maturity required for galactic citizenship. The vote was unanimous. 47 civilizations agreed that humanity didn't matter. Thelazik watched Chen's face. He expected anger, perhaps tears. Young species often broke down when faced with rejection. Some begged. Some threatened. Some simply left in despair. Chen did none of these things. She bowed slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. This council has made its position clear, she said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. Humanity will remember this decision. Thank you for your time. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every being in the chamber watched her go. There was something in the way she moved, the straightness of her spine, the measured pace of her steps. She wasn't fleeing. She wasn't defeated. She was leaving because there was no point in staying. The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. The council immediately moved to the next agenda item. Something about mining rights in the outer reach. Humanity was already forgotten, dismissed as completely as if they had never existed. Thelazik couldn't stop thinking about Chen's eyes. He had fought in 17 wars. He had seen fear, rage, desperation, and defeat in 1,000 different forms across 100 different species. He knew what beaten looked like. That wasn't what he had seen in Ambassador Chen's eyes. After the session ended, Thelazik returned to his quarters aboard the Vryn battle station orbiting the Council world. He pulled up humanity's files again, reading deeper this time. Their history was violent, yes. They had fought each other for thousands of years. But certain patterns emerged from the data. Humans had faced extinction events before. Ice ages, plagues, volcanic winters. Each time their population had crashed to near nothing. Each time they had survived. More than survived. They had spread, adapted, conquered their world through sheer stubborn persistence. They had a saying in one of their languages. Fall down 7 times. Stand up 8. Thelazik stared at the data for a long time. Then he filed a report with Vryn Military Intelligence. The report recommended monitoring human activity closely. It noted that dismissal might be more dangerous than engagement. The report was filed and forgotten, just like humanity itself. Outside his window, stars turned in their ancient patterns. Somewhere among them, humanity was going home to a species that had just learned an important lesson. The galaxy didn't want them. Thelazik wondered what they would do with that information. He suspected the Council wouldn't like the answer. 6 months passed. Thelazik expected reports of human collapse. Cut off from galactic trade, denied access to advanced technology, isolated from the community of civilized species, most young civilizations would fragment. Some would descend into civil war, fighting over scarce resources. Others would simply stagnate, their expansion halted, their dreams crushed. Humanity did neither. The first reports came from Vryn intelligence stations monitoring human space. Human ships had stopped appearing at the borders of established territories. For 3 weeks there was silence. The Galactic Council noted this absence with satisfaction. The upstart species had learned its place. Then the reports changed. "Commander, you need to see this," his intelligence officer said, projecting a holographic display in the war room. The image showed a human colony world, one of the 7 they had established. Construction had accelerated. Massive orbital platforms were being built at a pace that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. "Where are they getting the resources?" Thelazik asked. "From asteroids, from their own mining operations, from recycling everything they can strip from their older ships." The officer pulled up more data. "They're not trading because they've created their own supply chains. Every colony specializes in different production. One focuses on raw materials, another on manufacturing, a third on agriculture. They've built a complete economic system without any external support." Thelazik studied the numbers. The efficiency was remarkable. Wasteful in some ways, yes. Humans worked with the subtlety of a hammer compared to the refined techniques of older civilizations. But they were working constantly. Multiple shifts, crews rotating every 8 hours, construction proceeding day and night. "They're like insects," the intelligence officer said with distaste, "just building and consuming." But Thelazik saw something different. He saw adaptation. More reports arrived daily. Human vessels were mapping regions of space the Galactic Council had marked as too dangerous or unprofitable to explore. Dead zones, they were called. Areas with unstable stars, dense asteroid fields, or exotic radiation that damaged standard vessels. Humans went there anyway. They lost ships. The casualty report showed that clearly. But for every ship that vanished into a radiation storm or was crushed by gravitational anomalies, 3 more followed. They were learning, mapping, finding paths through regions that other species had declared impossible to navigate. "Why are they going into those areas?" a Vryn admiral asked during a strategic briefing. Thelazik had studied Earth's history enough to understand. "Because we told them they couldn't have the safe routes," he said. "So they're making their own," the admiral laughed. "Let them waste their resources on dead space." But Thelazik didn't laugh. He kept watching. 3 months after the embargo, human ships began appearing with new technology. Their FTL drives were more efficient. Their hull plating showed resistance to radiation types that would cripple Council vessels. Their weapon systems, crude as they were, had been upgraded with innovations that Vryn engineers found crude but effective. "How are they advancing so quickly?" Thelazik demanded. The answer came from a deep intelligence report. Humans had captured a derelict alien survey ship in one of the dead zones. They had taken it apart piece by piece, studying every component. Then they had built their own versions, not copying exactly but adapting the principles to their own manufacturing capabilities. Reverse engineering was common enough. But the speed of human implementation was extraordinary. They went from discovery to deployment in weeks, not years. Their scientists worked in massive collaborative groups, sharing data instantly across their network. They had no respect for intellectual property barriers, no academic gatekeeping. If knowledge existed, they spread it to everyone who could use it. Chaotic, the Vrin Science Division reported. No proper peer review, no verification protocols. They're advancing through trial and error like savages. Yet they were advancing. Thelazik received a report that troubled him more than all the others. Human colonies had stopped fighting among themselves. Earth's fractured nations, the very disunity the Council had cited as proof of human immaturity, had dissolved into a unified front. Not a single government, no. They were too stubborn for that. But a coordinated alliance with a single purpose. The purpose was survival. And proving the galaxy wrong. He found an intercepted human transmission, a speech given by one of their leaders to a colony population. The translation field struggled with some of the concepts, but the meaning was clear. They looked at us and saw nothing worth their time, the human leader said. They saw us as children playing with matches. So let's show them what children can do when you leave them alone in the workshop. Let's build things they never imagined. Let's go places they're afraid to explore. Let's become so impossible to ignore that they'll regret ever dismissing us. The crowd had roared approval. Thelazik played the transmission 3 times. There was something in it that made his combat instincts scream warnings. This wasn't the speech of a beaten species begging for recognition. This was a declaration of intent from a species that had decided rejection was just another obstacle to overcome. He filed another report with Vrin Command. He noted the rapid technological advancement, the unified response, the expansion into dangerous territories. He recommended opening diplomatic channels before humanity became a genuine threat. The report was marked as overly cautious and filed away. In the council chamber, when Thelazik tried to bring up human activity during a routine session, Speaker Vorish waved a tentacle dismissively. The humans are irrelevant. Why waste time discussing them? Outside the chamber windows, a human survey ship passed through the system, mapping jump roads through a region the council had declared impassable. The ship's hull bore scorch marks from radiation exposure and micrometeorite impacts, but it was still flying. Thelazik watched it go and felt a cold certainty settle in his core. The council had made a mistake. They had given humanity exactly the wrong motivation. They had given them something to prove. 1 year after the embargo, the first shots were fired. Thelazik was aboard his flagship, the Righteous Flame, when the alert came through. A human mining vessel had entered territory claimed by the Kaldrith sovereignty. The Kaldrith had ordered the humans to leave. The humans had responded by asking who gave the Kaldrith the right to claim space they weren't using. The situation escalated quickly. The Kaldrith, still bitter about being laughed at by other council members for their marginal status, saw an opportunity to prove their strength. They dispatched 3 warships to enforce their territorial claim. The human mining vessel refused to retreat. Thelazik watched the sensor data with growing unease. He had expected the human ship to run. It was unarmed, a simple industrial vessel with mining equipment and cargo holds. Against 3 Kaldrith destroyers, it had no chance. The human ship didn't run. It positioned itself near a large asteroid and began mining operations, completely ignoring the Kaldrith warships. The Kaldrith commander, outraged by this disrespect, opened fire. The mining vessel lasted 47 seconds before it disintegrated. 63 humans died. The Kaldrith commander sent a message to the human colonies demanding recognition of Kaldrith, territorial sovereignty, and payment for the inconvenience of having to destroy their ship. The human response arrived 3 days later. It wasn't a message, but 3. Kaldrith colonies went dark within the same hour. Communications ceased. Orbital platforms stopped responding. When Kaldrith ships arrived to investigate, they found devastation. Industrial centers destroyed by precisely targeted strikes. Orbital defenses disabled before they could even fire. The colonies themselves were intact, the populations unharmed, but the infrastructure that supported them was smoking ruins. The Kaldrith military counted their losses. 15,000 personnel, 36 ships, and the economic output of 3 industrial worlds. The human losses: 1 unarmed mining vessel and 63 civilians. The exchange rate horrified Thelazik. How did they do this? He demanded, studying the tactical reports. The human strike forces had appeared from nowhere, hit their targets with surgical precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The attack pattern showed sophistication that shouldn't exist in a species barely a century into space travel. His tactical officer highlighted key details. They used the dead zones, Commander. The routes they've been mapping for months. They approached from angles we don't monitor because our ships can't safely navigate those areas. Their vessels are built to survive what would destroy ours. And their targeting? Thelazic asked. Perfect. They knew exactly where to hit for maximum economic damage with minimal casualties. They studied Caldrith colony layouts, probably from long-range scans over the past year. They've been watching us, learning our patterns, identifying our weaknesses. Thelazic felt something cold settle in his chest. This was what happened when you dismissed a potential enemy. They studied you while you ignored them. They learned your vulnerabilities while you assumed they were too primitive to be dangerous. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Caldrith demanded justice, reparations, and Council military support for retaliation. They painted humans as barbaric aggressors who attacked without provocation. Ambassador Chen appeared via holographic transmission. She stood in the same position she had occupied a year ago, but everything about her had changed. She wasn't a petitioner anymore. She was delivering terms. The Caldrith sovereignty fired upon an unarmed civilian vessel without warning, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation fields. 63 civilians were murdered. The Caldrith then demanded payment for the privilege of being killed. Humanity's response was proportional and restrained. Restrained. Vorish's tentacles lashed in agitation. You destroyed 3 colonies. We destroyed industrial targets, Chen corrected. Every civilian on those worlds survived. We could have done much worse. We chose not to. Consider that choice carefully before you decide to escalate. The casual confidence in her words sent ripples of shock through the chamber. She was threatening the entire council. Thelazic wanted to speak, to warn them that pushing humanity further was dangerous. But he remained silent, bound by military protocol. He could only watch as the council made their decision. This aggression cannot stand, Vorish declared. If humanity will not accept the civilized order, they must be taught their place. I call for a vote on military action. The vote passed with overwhelming support. Only the Vryn delegation abstained, and that only because Thelazic had argued strenuously with his superiors. Even they didn't believe humans posed a real threat. They abstained out of caution, not concern. The council authorized a punitive expedition. 300 ships from various council militaries would assemble and proceed to Earth itself. The humans would be given a choice: surrender and accept council authority, or be reduced to a pre-spaceflight civilization. Their colonies would be occupied, their ships impounded, their faster-than-light capability stripped away. It would be a police action, the council declared. A necessary correction of an upstart species. The fleet would arrive. Humanity would recognize the futility of resistance and order would be restored. Ambassador Chen listened to the declaration without expression. When Vorish finished, she spoke one sentence: "You're making a mistake." Then her hologram vanished. Thelazic sat in his quarters that night, reviewing everything he knew about human history. He had learned something about them over the past year. They had a concept they called total war. It was a strategy they had developed fighting each other. When humans decided a conflict was existential, they committed everything. Every resource, every citizen, every ounce of their civilization's strength went toward victory. They didn't fight to win battles. They fought to destroy their enemy's ability to make war. The Galactic Council saw the upcoming action as a police operation. They were sending 300 ships to teach a lesson to primitives. Thelazic suspected humans saw it differently. They saw an existential threat, an overwhelming force coming to take away their freedom, their sovereignty, their future. They saw a war. The Vryn Empire's delegation to the expeditionary force consisted of 42 vessels, including Thelazic's flagship. He had his orders. He would obey them. But as his fleet departed for human space, he felt the weight of certainty settling on him. The Council had dismissed humanity as irrelevant a year ago. That had been a mistake. Now they were about to make a worse one. They were about to show humanity they were an enemy worth fighting. The fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system in a display meant to inspire awe and terror. 300 warships from a dozen different civilizations, each one carrying weapons that could crack a planet's crust. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, a wall of power that filled the sensor screens. Delazik stood on the bridge of the righteous flame, his 4 eyes scanning tactical displays. The system appeared quiet. A handful of human ships orbited their homeworld, small things compared to the Council fleet. Earth itself glowed blue and white. A garden world covered in water and clouds, it looked peaceful, vulnerable. Broadcast surrender terms, the fleet commander ordered. He was a Vorath admiral, a species known for diplomatic solutions. This was supposed to be simple: show overwhelming force, accept surrender, occupy the system with minimal bloodshed. The human response came within seconds. This is Earth Defense Command. You have entered sovereign human territory without authorization. Turn back now or be destroyed. Laughter rippled through the fleet command channel. The human arrogance was almost entertaining. They had perhaps 40 ships in the system. The Council fleet had 300 vessels, some of which could destroy a small moon. They're bluffing, the Vorath admiral said. Proceed with occupation formation. The fleet began moving deeper into the system, drives flaring as they accelerated toward Earth. Standard tactics, overwhelming presence. The humans would see their futility and surrender. That's when the system came alive. The first mines detonated in the outer belt, massive fusion devices that had been hidden among millions of asteroids. They had been positioned over months, invisible until they activated. The explosions created a wall of radiation and debris that disrupted formation cohesion. Evasive maneuvers, commanders shouted across multiple vessels. Then the defense platforms activated. They had been built into the larger asteroids themselves, hidden until this moment. Railguns and laser batteries opened fire at velocities that made shields useless. Kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed simply punched through defensive fields. The Kaldrith section of the fleet, eager for revenge, pushed ahead of the formation. They ran straight into a minefield that had been hidden in a debris cloud. 15 ships died in the first 30 seconds, torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have existed in human arsenals. Where did they get this technology? Someone demanded over the command channel. Delazik knew the answer. Humans hadn't been given the technology. They had built it themselves, iterating and improving over the past year, learning from every scrap of data they could gather. They weren't as advanced as Council militaries, but they had focused everything on defense of this system. The human fleet didn't charge forward heroically. They fought like humans had always fought, using every advantage they could create. Small ships darted through the Council formation, too fast for the larger vessels to track effectively. They weren't trying to win stand-up fights. They were hitting weak points, disrupting communications, forcing the Council fleet to break formation. One human destroyer, its engines crippled and hull-venting atmosphere, turned directly toward a Council carrier and accelerated on emergency power. The crew had to know they were dead. They used their deaths as a weapon, ramming the carrier at full speed. The carrier's shields collapsed under the kinetic impact, and the ship's reactor breach took out 2 more Council vessels nearby. They're using suicide tactics, a horrified voice reported over the command channel. Delazik had read about this in human history files. When humans decided survival required it, they would sacrifice anything, including themselves. More human ships emerged from hiding positions. They had built reserves, stockpiled vessels in the outer system, hidden them in places Council sensors didn't expect. Each one fought with the desperate efficiency of beings defending their only home. The battle became chaos. Council ships were designed for engagements against civilized opponents who followed established warfare protocols. Humans followed no protocols. They used false surrender signals to lure ships in close, then detonated their own reactors. They fired nuclear-tipped missiles that nobody used anymore because they were too crude. Crude, but effective against shields designed to stop more sophisticated weapons. One human cruiser, surrounded by 3 Council destroyers, stopped firing entirely. The Council ships closed in to accept surrender. The human vessel split open, revealing it had been hollowed out and filled with explosives. The blast crippled all 3 destroyers. Fall back, the Vorath admiral ordered. Reform at the outer system. But falling back in formation was impossible. The human defense network had been designed to channel invading forces into kill zones. As Council ships retreated, they ran into more mines, more hidden platforms, more layers of defense that humans had spent a year building. Delazik's flagship shuddered under impacts. Armor plating peeled away. His tactical officer reported damage to primary weapons. "Commander, we need to withdraw." "Negative," Thelazic said, watching his screens. "We hold position and cover the withdrawal of damaged vessels." The righteous flame took 3 more hits. The 4th struck the engineering section, and Thelazic felt the artificial gravity fluctuate. Alarms screamed through every deck. His ship was dying. "Abandon ship," he ordered calmly. "All crew to evacuation pods." His officers hesitated. Vryn military tradition demanded commanders die with their vessels, but Thelazic saw no honor in pointless death. "That's an order. Move." He was the last one to the pods, making sure his crew escaped. As he sealed himself into the cramped capsule, he watched through the viewport as the righteous flame, his home for 70 years, drifted dead in space. The pod ejected, tiny thrusters pushing it clear of the battle zone. Through the viewport, Thelazic watched the remainder of the Council fleet limp away. They had come with 300 vessels. Perhaps 200 would make it out of the system. 50 ships destroyed or crippled, thousands dead. Against a species the Council had dismissed as primitive. Something appeared on the pod's sensor screen. A human ship, small and fast. It maneuvered close to the pod, and Thelazic felt magnetic clamps engage. They were capturing him. He was a prisoner. The pod was drawn into the human ship's hold. The inner door opened, revealing a docking bay that smelled of recycled air and machine oil. Human soldiers in armored suits stood waiting, weapons ready but not raised, and standing behind them, wearing the same simple black suit she had worn a year ago, was Ambassador Chen. She looked older now, tired, but her eyes held the same calculation they had shown in the council chamber. "Commander Thelazic," she said, "welcome aboard. We need to talk." The human medical facility was smaller than Vryn's standard, but efficient. They treated Thelazic's injuries with surprising competence, adapting their equipment to his physiology, using data they must have gathered from his species' biology during the battle. Within a day he was mobile again, though confined to a diplomatic guest quarter that was clearly also a cell. Ambassador Chen visited him on the 3rd day. She brought tea, a human custom he had read about. The gesture was both hospitable and pointed. She was demonstrating civilization while he sat as her prisoner. "Your crew is safe," she said, settling into a chair across from him. "All 317 members. We've been treating the wounded. No one will be harmed." "Generous, considering we came to conquer you," Thelazic said. "You came because the council ordered you to." Chen corrected. "We know the difference between soldiers following orders and the politicians who give those orders." She sipped her tea. "You tried to warn them, didn't you?" "I saw your dissenting vote on the military action." Thelazic's head crest raised in surprise. "You have intelligence sources in the council?" "We have eyes and ears everywhere now," Chen said simply. "Turns out when you're dismissed and ignored, people stop watching what you're doing. Made it very easy to insert monitoring systems." She smiled without humor. "You'd be surprised how many council species were willing to sell us data once we established independent trade routes." "You bought intelligence from council members?" "Some of them. Others just didn't secure their networks well enough." Chen set down her cup. "Commander, I asked you here because I believe you understand something the rest of the council doesn't. I want to know if I'm right." Thelazic considered his words carefully. "You want to know if I understand why you won?" "Why we survived," Chen corrected. "We didn't win. We lost 43 ships and 20,000 people defending the system. But yes, I want to know if you understand what happened." Thelazic looked at her for a long moment. "Your species doesn't know how to quit," he said finally. "That's what I've learned. The council dismissed you, and instead of accepting that dismissal, you built your own infrastructure. The Kaldrith attacked you, and you retaliated with precision that should have been beyond your capabilities. We brought 300 warships to force your surrender, and you fought us with everything you had." "Go on," Chen said quietly. "I reviewed Earth's history extensively over the past year," Thelazic continued. "Your species has faced extinction multiple times. Climate disasters, diseases, wars that nearly destroyed your civilization. Every time you survived. Not because you were the strongest or the smartest. Because you refused to die." Chen nodded slowly. "We have a term for it, spite. When the universe says you can't do something, humans take it personally." She stood and walked to the viewport showing Earth below. "Do you know what we were, Commander? Before we reached space, we were persistence hunters. Our ancestors would chase prey for days, running them to exhaustion. We couldn't run as fast as other predators. We couldn't kill with claws or venom, but we could keep going when everything else stopped. And you applied that same principle to space travel, Thelazik said. To technology. To warfare. We applied it to survival. Chen turned back to him. The council looked at us and saw children playing with technology we didn't understand. They saw division and primitive thinking. They decided we didn't matter. And you made them pay attention. We made them pay, Chen corrected. Not because we wanted to. Because we had no choice. You can't ignore someone and then complain when they find their own path. You can't dismiss someone and then act surprised when they prove you wrong. She returned to her chair. Commander, you're going to be released. You and your entire crew. We're sending you back to the council with terms. Terms? Thelazik felt his crest flatten in surprise. You won the battle. You could demand anything. We won a defensive battle in our home system, Chen said. We can't win a war against the entire Galactic Council. We're not stupid enough to try, but we've proven we can make any victory cost more than it's worth. She leaned forward. Here are our terms. The Council will recognize humanity as a sovereign species with full rights. The embargo ends. We get access to trade routes and diplomatic channels. In exchange, we agree to follow established settlement protocols and participate in the galactic community. That's what you asked for a year ago, Thelazik said, before the dismissal. Yes. The only difference is now the Council knows what happens if they ignore us. Chen's expression hardened. We didn't want this war, Commander. We wanted trade, friendship, and knowledge. We came in peace and were met with contempt. Everything that happened after was the Council's choice. Thelazik understood now. The humans weren't conquerors. They were survivors who had been forced to become warriors. The distinction mattered. Will the Council accept these terms? He asked. That depends on whether you can make them understand what they're facing. Chen stood. You've fought for 2 centuries, Commander. You've seen many species and many wars. Can you make them see that humanity isn't going away? That we'll keep adapting, keep building, keep pushing until we get what we came for originally. Recognition as equals. Thelazik rose from his chair. I will try. But the Council is proud. So are we, Chen said. The question is whether they're proud enough to lose more fleets proving a point. She extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Help us make peace, Commander, before this escalates into something nobody can control. Thelazik clasped her hand carefully. Her grip was surprisingly strong. 2 weeks later, he stood before the Galactic Council once again. His armor still bore scorch marks from the battle. He had refused to replace it. The Council needed to see the price of their decisions. This body authorized a punitive expedition to enforce civilized order. He began. That expedition failed. Not because humans had superior numbers or technology, but because they were willing to pay any price to defend their home. He displayed tactical data from the battle. They lost more ships than we did proportionally. They lost more people, but they achieved their objective. They drove us from their system, and they did it using weapons and tactics we dismissed as primitive. Vorish's tentacles writhed in agitation. Are you suggesting we surrender to these barbarians? I'm suggesting you recognize reality, Thelazik said coldly. Humanity has delivered terms. Recognize them as equals. Grant them the diplomatic status they originally requested, and they will participate in galactic society peacefully. Refuse, and they will continue adapting, building, and becoming more dangerous with each passing day. He swept his gaze across the assembled delegates. This species doesn't surrender. They don't stop. They don't know how. You can accept them as partners, or you can fight a war that will cost thousands more lives and hundreds more ships. The choice is yours. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The vote took 3 hours. In the end, fear and pragmatism won over pride. Humanity was granted full diplomatic recognition and rights within the Galactic Council. The embargo was lifted. Trade routes opened. Thelazik watched from the observation deck as human ships began arriving at council stations, carrying goods and people eager to finally join the galactic community they had been denied. Ambassador Chen stood beside him. Thank you, she said simply. Don't thank me yet, Thelazik replied. The council has accepted you, but they fear you now. That fear may cause problems. Let them fear, Chen said quietly. As long as they respect us, that's enough. She looked at him with those calculating eyes. You understand us now, don't you? I understand that my people made a grave mistake, Thelazik said. We confused dismissal with wisdom. We thought ignoring you would make you irrelevant. He gestured at the human ships. Instead, we made you determined. There's a difference between an enemy and a species that has something to prove. Yes, Chen agreed, and the galaxy just learned that lesson the hard way. Below them, human vessels moved through space that had been denied to them just months before. They flew carefully, following protocols now, integrating into the galactic order, but Telazik noticed they still traveled in groups, their weapon systems obviously active even in peaceful space. They had learned not to trust easily. The Council had taught them that lesson. The price of that education was written in destroyed ships and lost lives. It was a cost the Council had paid in blood and pride, and Telazik suspected they would be paying it for generations to come. As humanity took their place among the stars, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget, and absolutely impossible to dismiss ever again,